Start off by bringing your arms out to the side and flipping your palms face down. Let's make sure that your arms are in line with your shoulders. So bring that left hand a little closer towards your hips. Perfect. If I stand above you, your wrist to opposite wrist is one nice straight line. From here, let's take your right ankle and bring it to the top of your left thigh. Using your right hip, press that right knee away from you just a little bit more. And now let's drop down and rotate your legs down to the floor to the left. As your legs rotate to the floor to the left, you're going to turn your head to the right. But let's make sure it's not a turn and the chin moves towards the shoulder. I want you to feel the head stays in place. You're literally just pivoting and swiveling your head. The whole goal of this exercise is to keep this top leg straight, pointing up towards the ceiling. So this shin bone should be straight. And when this leg is straight, that means we are externally rotating at the hip joint. Our hip is rotating this way to the right. Our pelvis is rotating to the left. We are wringing out how the hip and the pelvis work together. We're trying to create some space and open them up in opposing ranges and positions. Let's make sure we take a couple really nice deep breaths here. Feel that oxygen expand and open up the rib cage, and then let out a couple deep breaths. Ten seconds left. When the hip and pelvis can rotate, this is a pretty simple position to stay in. If you feel any significant level of a stretch or a pinch or discomfort, that tells us kind of what the problem is, which is the hip and the pelvis aren't able to rotate in opposing directions anymore. So come back up towards the middle. Nice and slow. Great. Your arms are going to stay in that position. Bring your right foot down to the ground. And now we're going to do the other side. Left ankle comes on top of the right thigh. Press the left knee away from you. And now drop down to the floor. Good. And remember, this shin of the knee pointing up should point straight up towards the ceiling. That way, again, the left hip is externally rotated. The pelvis is rotating the opposite way. And we really get to get a little bit of disassociation between how the hip and the pelvis are positioned within each other. Take a couple of deep breaths and just recognize how this left hip and pelvis can do this compared to how the right hip and pelvis can do this. Your experience should give you some understanding and clarity with how or if both hips can function together. Now, today we started off with the right hip and then finished with the left. Tomorrow, the next time you do this, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to start off with the left hip and then finish off with the right. All right, great job. Come back up to the middle. Both feet back down, flat on the ground. You're going to take 2 bath towels, and I'm going to show you how I want you to roll that up. We're not looking for really big rolls. We're looking for, when we roll this up, it's about the circumference of whatever your grip is. That'll be appropriate for this. So we're going to roll up 2 bath towels to about the same level of thickness. You're going to place one of these towels right underneath your neck, right here. So think of wherever that throat is. You're going to place it right below that throat. And then the other towel is going to be right underneath your back. So if you lift your hips up and you place this roll right underneath your back, a great way to do this is to find where your belly button is, and directly below your belly button is where the second roll is going to be. So just in this position, we've got 2 rolls that are supporting the forward curves of our spine. Notice how one roll is below the neck, one roll is below the lumbar spine. From here, let's take a strap and we're going to strap up the legs. Strap is going to go just above the knee and feet come back down to the ground. So we're basically in our triangle position. And from here, let's go a little bit wider with our arm position. A little wider arms is going to help those shoulders come a little bit flatter down to the ground. Now we've got this for 10 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and start my timer. Over the next 10 minutes, I want you to just press outward on this strap. And it's not pulsing on and off, it's just one long, consistent press out. And breathe. This is a long position. It's called the glute conversation because for the next 10 minutes, the entire intention and focus is going to be you teaching your nervous system, your brain, how to hold a conversation with your glutes, the muscles that propel you forwards, the muscles that stabilize your pelvis and spine. And this is you just rediscovering what that conversation's like. If there's great glute function, you're going to feel both sides of your hips work, and that's all the work is, and it's even, and it's balanced, and it's easy. Some of you might not find this work anywhere in your glutes. Some of you might find the outer left shin really starting to work hard. Some of you might wonder why your right shoulder is trying to roll off the ground. We are just trying to find basic glute function, and if your glutes haven't worked for quite some time, what you're going to experience is whatever muscle group that you've taught to make up for the idea that the glutes don't work, that's going to chime in. And that's why this exercise is 10 minutes long, so you can have enough time to unwind whatever else wants to chime in and give your body enough time, your nervous system enough time for the right muscles to start showing up, which are the outer hips and your glutes. You also might feel some of the inner hips, the hip flexors too, because no muscle works in isolation. But the primary goal is that outer hip. Now, I've got towels in this exercise to help support the spine position. Some of you who might have a really arched lower back and a really arched neck, you would know that if your gaze is always looking upwards. Maybe you might want to explore this exercise without props, right? Without the towels to allow your spine to settle to the floor. But I've found over the years working with people, this is probably one of the best ways that people need to do this is with towels to reestablish the three curves of the spine and to give your body with those three curves, give your body some time. Also make sure that both feet are pointing straight ahead. So what I want you to do is kick your heels just a little wider. Great. And remember to keep the tension on the strap the entire time. Why don't you take a couple deep, slow breaths? Let's not forcibly inhale and exhale. Just a really slow, subtle breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Remind your body that your hips and pelvis can work and you can breathe at the same time. It doesn't need to be an either-or experience. And when you feel like you've got the breath down and that's happening, and you can feel like you can press outward on the strap, that could be all you can do, but we're going to go just one level deeper. So what I'd like you to do right now is place both hands on your pelvis, and let's make sure that one hip isn't higher than the other, because we don't want to go stabilize the pelvis and spine with one hip being higher than the other. So while we're here, let's pass the time and just kind of feel around for where your pelvis is. And once you feel where this bone is, you got these pointy little bones in the front of your pelvis that go all the way to your lower back. Then take your thumbs, and I want you to kind of poke around for where the bottom of your rib cage is. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get a sense of, is there equal spacing between your ribs and your pelvis right now? Or does one side feel really jammed and closer towards one side of the ribs and the other side has a ton of space? If that's you in this position, gently press that pelvis that's higher up, just a little further away, create a little bit more space, because I want you to have a stable, level pelvis throughout the next 5.5 minutes. And you might need to kind of go back and forth, just taking a minute to have your arms open up and have those shoulders settle to the ground, and then just making sure that that hip hike didn't come back, and then coming back down to the ground again. And you'll find a pace that's good for you to make sure that that pelvis stays in place. The most important thing, once we have those basic cues, remember breathing, keeping the strap tight, the pelvis is level. The most important thing now is about what you're thinking about. If you have imbalance, you will feel one hip work different than the other. But put some space between that, because that doesn't mean now go try to find the hip that you don't feel. I trust that you're in the right position. I trust that everything is aligned. The strap is keeping both legs in the same position. If you're experiencing one hip work different than the other, this is you asking both hips to work together and them not being able to do so. So I don't want you to go manipulate how you're doing this exercise just to feel balanced. Trust that your body, given enough time in this position, will start to be able to load both hips the same. What you're experiencing is that not happening, and that's okay. If you have years or decades of imbalance and improper movement patterns, and your glutes have been affected, which, let's face it, most people are, it would be weird to do this exercise your first couple times and feel really great glute engagement. You're gonna feel all of the weird ways, the funky ways that your body has had to help you move without your glutes being able to support you. And the body has a couple really special tricks up its sleeve. When we experience pain or when there's an injury, one of the first things that happens is we shut down glute function as a means to heal ourselves. The largest, most powerful muscles in our body, our nervous system actually suppresses signals to them in an attempt to prevent us from moving. And this helps us heal a little bit faster. But the problem lies is that our body doesn't reverse this process well. So when our glutes shut down, if we sprain an ankle or throw out our back, they don't just come on randomly. There has to be time spent working to reestablish this connection. Make sure you're breathing. There's nothing for you to do outside of your legs just pressing outward on that strap. If you feel your core start to tighten up, that's a great way for you to understand compensation. We're here trying to talk to your glutes, and you're having other muscles chime in. Remind yourself to relax any other muscle group that wants to help out. Some of you might feel that lower back start to tighten and arch. Remind it to relax. This is about the glutes. Nothing else needs to chime in here. You've got about 1.5 minutes left. Great job so far. Let's keep the pressure even on the feet. Not trying to roll the ankles outward. The foot stays calm and flat as the hips stabilize. It's probably one of my favorite exercises because we're not introducing any variable of motion. This is you just sitting with how your nervous system communicates with your muscular system. And this makes it really hard to cheat, makes it really hard to compensate. We have to deal with glute function in some way, shape, or form over these 10 minutes. And by reducing all of the other ways people try to find glutes, either by doing clamshells or trying to move one leg instead of the other, by reducing all of that, we purely find that glute function. And we're coming up on 10 minutes. Great job with this. Go ahead and get out of it. Relax the strap. You can stay longer if you want, but I think 10 minutes is a great place to start. Start off by stepping your left foot a half a step back and then moving your left foot into a high heel position. So you're going to come up onto the ball of the left foot. Now we're going to lift the right leg off the ground just enough so the right hip flexor can work, and then the right foot settles down on the ground again. And then repeat, lift it up and set it down. We're going to do this for a minute. Now, what we should notice is that the weight of your pelvis stays right in the middle throughout the entire exercise, whether we're lifting or not. And the pelvis should stay still, the lower back should stay still. Really, the only joint that's moving right now is the side of the leg that we're raising. That hip should be the only joint moving. Our left foot is in this high heel position to create a little bit of instability so the right hip flexor can start doing its job. Okay, now bring the right foot down to the ground. The left heel goes to the ground as well. Line up the feet again. Now let's bring the right foot a half a step back. Move the right heel into a high heel position. And now we're going to do the opposite side. So now lift the left leg off the ground and then let it settle. We're going to be doing this for a minute. Pay attention to if the weight of your pelvis stays in the middle or if your pelvis has to rotate every time you lift this leg. You might notice that one leg feels entirely different than the other. This is the imbalance of the hip flexors showing up. Ideally, we want the pelvis to stay still as the leg raises. If the pelvis is not stable or if there's an imbalance, when you go to raise the leg, the pelvis will actually reposition itself, rotate either clockwise, counterclockwise. Maybe it'll tilt back like a posterior tilt. Maybe it'll excessively arch forward. Bottom line is you're going to have to move your pelvis so you can even begin to move the hip, and that's compensation in action. We want to get this to such a functional level that we can just use the hip without anything else having to change positions for one joint to move. Okay, we're going to go into the other side one more time. So now step the left foot a half a step back, put it into a high heel position, and begin. We're going to be here for another minute. What I really want you to focus on is we're not going really fast here. Allow the foot to touch the ground and settle, and then lift it up. Allow the foot to touch the ground again. Feel the hip raising muscles settle, and then ask them to work. We're not trying to keep the leg off the ground the whole time and keep tension in the hip flexor the whole time. Again, we're trying to restore function. So let it work, and then let it relax. Let it work, and then let it relax. We're breathing, the shoulders are relaxed, the jaw is relaxed, and we're reminding the hip that it can move independently on its own. Now let's begin to switch sides one last time. Bring your right foot a half a step back, elevate your right heel into a high heel position, and begin to lift your left leg. We're going to be here for one more minute. If there was a noticeable imbalance, or if there was instability of your pelvis moving around, you might probably start to notice that on the second set, it might actually be a little bit more stable. Don't put too much expectations on that, especially if this is a new exercise for you. But over time, you should notice that both legs start to feel the same as you restore access and function to how both hips are designed to work. Friendly reminder to keep the upper body soft and relaxed. Great. We just completed 2 rounds of that. You have the option to pause this video now and do an additional round, or maybe an additional 2 rounds if these muscles just start to feel really good. Let's start this next exercise by lying on your back and scooting your hips as close to the wall as possible. And then when you're as close as you can get, then we're going to roll over onto your back with your legs straight up the wall. You might need to shimmy a little bit closer if you can. If your hips are not able to flex that well, you might notice that your hips and pelvis come up off of the ground. If that's the case, we're too close. So you're going to scoot further back until you feel your hips and pelvis settle a little bit fuller and more flat on the ground. And that might mean you're 2 to 3 feet away from the wall. That's okay. You'll get closer over time. Once we're in this position, this isn't just about tugging on the hamstrings and creating length with the calf and the hamstring. It's also about you finding stability. So let's make this active. For the next 4 minutes, that I'll start right now, I want you to tighten the front of your thighs, really engage these quad muscles, and actively pull the feet down as best you can. And it's going to be really important on this foot pull down that we don't just pull through the inner arch and the outer edge raises. We want to pull from that outer edge down so the whole top of that foot is as flat as possible. If at any given time, you could put a cup of water on here and it would stay flat on that foot. And breathe. There's nothing for your upper body to do here except relax. You might notice that one leg feels tighter than the other. You also might notice that one quad or thigh muscle is having a harder time staying on or stabilizing. That's okay. That's just imbalance and asymmetry showing up. That will get better over time. One of the main important intentions with this exercise and why it's one of my favorite ways, I don't want to put it into the category of just a hamstring stretch, although that is a huge outcome and a byproduct of just being in this position. This is really to get your hips to flex. Think of the old school way to stretch hamstrings, right? Holding the leg out and reaching straight towards the toes. If the hamstrings are tight and you don't have the hip mobility needed, how you're going to stretch the hamstrings is by rounding the entire spine. So we're not actually changing much with how the hips or the legs are working. We're just achieving all that motion through the lower back. So with the old school hamstring stretches of just reaching towards our toes, we're actually training the compensation pattern of the spine moving more than the hips. But that can't happen in this position. The floor is holding your upper body in a straight aligned angle while we're actually achieving the length in the hips and the hamstrings. So it's a great way to just target the legs' responsibility when the hips are flexed and the upper body is straight and neutral. Friendly reminder, pull those toes back a little bit further. Get as much as you can out of this. Reminder to breathe. Both knees should point straight back towards you. Let's make sure one foot's not rotated in a different angle or position than the other. Great job. That was 4 minutes.